10th, 2020 Troy City Council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for the roll call. Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Kranga?
Here.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
All present this evening. First on the agenda is a late submittal to vote on resolution to waive the rules of procedure for the City Council Rule Number 5A, regular meeting agendas to add an item on the agenda, and I'll move that's resolved. Troy City Council hereby suspends rules of procedure for the City Council Rule Number 5A, regular meeting agendas to consider an item not on the agenda.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, that we approve the resolution to waive the rules that's just read into the record. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Kranga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next up is another late submittal, proposed resolution to delay the oath of office for Councilmember Rebecca Chamberlain Kranga. I'll move resolved that is allowed under Section 3.5 and Section 6.9 of the Troy City Charter. The Troy City Council hereby recognizes that there are extenuating circumstances to prevent newly elected Councilmember Rebecca Chamberlain Kranga from taking the official oath of office within 10 days of the August 4th, 2020 election, and determines that she shall continue to serve as a Troy City Council member, holding that office until 7:30 p.m. on August 24th, 2020, as set forth in Troy's Charter, Section 6.7. At the August 24th, 2020 City Council meeting, the elected City Council member, as certified by the Board of Oakland County Canvassers, shall take the constitutional oath of office and shall commence the elected term immediately afterwards.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Brooks, that we approve the proposed resolution to delay the oath of office for Councilmember Rebecca Chamberlain Kranga. Discussion. I will just state we received a memo on this. The Oakland County Board of Canvassers has not yet certified Rebecca's election victory from last Tuesday, so this was necessary to do. And congratulations, Rebecca. First of all, I got to be the first to say it on tonight, but so the City Attorney Bloom has put together a memo that clearly defines that we're well within our rights to continue her appointment until those votes are certified, and she'll be sworn in officially at our next meeting. So, the vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Kranga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes. Motion carries. All right, next on the agenda this evening is certificates of recognition and special presentations. We have one this evening. It's C1, a proclamation to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, securing the right of women to vote. And I'll present it now. Whereas the right to vote is the cornerstone of representative democracy, bold and courageous women from Michigan and throughout the nation fought for 7 decades to win the right to vote, beginning with the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. And whereas Michigan women won the right to vote on November 5th, 1918, when the voters passed an amendment to the state constitution, nearly 2 years before women were able to vote nationally. And whereas Michigan was one of the first 3 states to ratify the 19th Amendment on June 10th, 1919, the same date as Wisconsin and Illinois. And whereas the right of women to vote nationally was finally secured by the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution on August 18th, 1920. And whereas since women won the right to vote and to be elected to public office, the legislative agenda and policies have been shaped by them to include children's issues, maternal health, women's contributions to the economy, and women gaining economic independence. And whereas the 19th Amendment did not guarantee suffrage for all women, including African American, Native American, Asian, and Latino women, many of whom suffered voter suppression until the passage of the Voting Rights Act, 1965. And whereas in 2020, women are not only voting in local, state, and national elections, but are leading in all levels of government and are running for office in unprecedented numbers. And whereas the women who serve in our federal, state, and local governments including the majority of this city council, follow in the footsteps of these resolute suffragist sisters. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution has played a crucial role in advancing the rights of women. And whereas the Troy City Council recognizes former Mayor Jean Stein for being the first female on City Council, serving from April of 1976 to 1992, and serving as Troy's first female mayor from 1992 to 2001. After taking 1 year off, she served again on City Council from April 2003 to November 2007. Former Mayor Jean Stein is to be applauded for all her hard work and dedication to the city of Troy, as well as leading the way for many other women who served and are currently serving on the Troy City Council. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Troy City Council hereby celebrates the 100th anniversary of the passage of and ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, securing the right of women to vote. And be it further resolved that the Troy City Council recognizes the role of the ratification of the 19th Amendment in promoting the core values of our democracy as promised by the Constitution of the United States. And be it further resolved that the Troy City Council reaffirms this opportunity for people in Troy and beyond to learn about the women's suffrage movement and the role of women in our democracy, to strengthen democratic participation of all people, and to inspire future generations to cherish and preserve the right established by the 19th Amendment. It's signed and presented this 10th day of August 2020. And I just want to thank Councilmember Erickson Galt for initially taking the bull by the horns for this. Maybe that's not the right not the right analogy here of all analogies for this proclamation, for putting together this proclamation and submitting it. I think it's a great idea. I'm very thankful, and so thank you. Next on the agenda this evening, there are no carryover items. There's no public hearings scheduled this evening, so we move on to public comment. I'll turn it over to City Clerk Dixon to read any emails that came in for public comment or play any voicemails that came in for public comment. City Clerk Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 public comments from email tonight and 2 voicemails. So the first public comment is from Mac Yoko. Dear Troy Mayor and City Council, teen violinist Kaori Marikawa plays violin concert on 6 Lakes for our community during pandemic since June to August to help people through music. Our people in this community would want to nominate her for city awards to thank the young lady's good deed and heart of gold. She's a great model for our young people. We, all of the neighbors, think to reward her great action for our community can motivate, rewarding her great action for our community can motivate more people to do good for our community. You can contact Emerald Lake Subdivision Board and they provide a phone number, or the violinist family and they provide a phone number for that. The second comment is from Jessica and Alex Brideau. Hello, I live on Avery Drive, directly behind the new development along Long Lake between John R. and DeQuinder. This home construction project has been nothing but a nuisance for everyone living in the subdivision along Stoddard and Avery Drive. Not only were we never informed that the project was beginning, despite the city and developer stating that we received postcards informing us of the details, I've asked every neighbor along the street and not a single one of us got said postcard. But now the lack of respect for the residents living here is truly unbelievable. Why this construction site has turned into an industrial operation for topsoil is beyond me, and we were never informed of that. The amount of dirt and dust that gets into our yards and home on a daily basis all day long is absolutely disgusting. It is causing health problems for not only my family, but several of our neighbors. It has completely destroyed one of the neighbors' pools and pool filter. Our pets are covered in dirt and children can no longer play outside. We have had to water a yard multiple times just to get rid of the dirt that is constantly covering our entire yard. We've complained to the developer several times, at which point they stated they sent out water trucks, but we've never seen one. We have never seen one of those water trucks used. They sit there completely idle. We have also mentioned to the developer that they should replace the fence that goes around the entire property line and put up a privacy fence. This would help alleviate some of the constant daily distractions that this construction is causing us. Our justification for asking for this is that this chain link fence that is easily 50 years old. Chain link fences, as determined by the manufacturers, only have a lifetime of 20 years. The lifetime of the spawns has far surpassed that. Therefore, it is no longer up to code. Please consider doing something about this. We know that this developer is literally eating up every vacant space in the entire city, but they have absolutely no right to demonstrate this level of disrespect and lack of concern for the people who have been here for far longer than they have. You have a lot of very irritated people surrounding this development, and if you won't do something, we will need to escalate this further. We rely on you, our city council, to represent the needs and best interests of the residents who have been here for years and years. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to this topic being in the August 10th meeting.
Mr. Baker, my name is Roger Walters. I watched your city council meeting on the 27th. You know, it was kind of eerie to watch everybody sit there and, you know, everybody vote yes for all kinds of different people. And Mr. Baker, and to all city council members, Mr. Baker, I was asking you about how much you made as mayor of Troy. Didn't ask you how much you made from the city council. I ran for Troy City Council a few years ago. So I'm going to clarify that with you. Could you still be honest with the people of the city of Troy? Because yes, you do make over $100,000 from being the mayor of the city of Troy. I know for a fact city council meetings like that, you get paid $178. When I talked to Lori Bloom a few years back, she even stated it to me. So when the next city council meeting, I'd like you had to tell the people of the city of Troy that you made a mistake and that you do make over $100,000 as mayor of Troy. City council members only make $178. So I'll be watching you at that next city council meeting. And Ms. Brooks, I'd be happy to vote for you as mayor of Troy. Thank you, Mr. Baker. And kind of like try to be a little honest. That'd be nice.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and Troy residents. My name is David Carl Anderson, and I am one of the candidates who ran for Troy City Council during the August 4th primary. I am very proud of the upbeat, positive, and informative campaign I ran for Troy City Council. While I didn't win this race, I am very proud of the fact I gave Troy voters a meaningful alternative candidate to consider for the city council position. I wish to thank the thousands of Troy residents who voted for me in this election. I also wish to thank the numerous past and present Democrat and Republican city, county, and state officials who endorsed my campaign. I am truly humbled by their bipartisan support. I wish to congratulate my opponent on her winning the city council race. I wish her well in her future endeavors. I wish to thank the Troy City Clerk, Elaine Dixon, and her wonderful staff on the great job they did in running the August 4th primary election. Having worked with Ms. Dixon for countless years on the Troy Elections Commission, I know her body of great work for the city of Troy and its residents, and the smooth and efficient running of the recent primary election was just another great job by our city clerk's office. Lastly, I would like to wish our city council well in terms of discharging its future municipal responsibilities. As a 40-year resident of Troy and a 43-year business owner in Troy, I pledge to do anything my city calls upon me to do to make Troy the best place in Michigan to live and work. Let's get through this coronavirus pandemic together in a safe manner, and then jointly focus on reopening our city's economy and returning Troy to its rightful position of being an economic powerhouse in Oakland County. Again, thank you, Troy residents, for your support during my city council race, and God bless all our Troy residents.
That concludes those who submitted public comment this evening. As you recall, as long as we're meeting virtually, you can submit a public comment voicemail by calling 248-524-3302, or you can leave or send an email to publiccomment@troymi.gov. The same 3-minute rules apply, and they'll be played or read as they just were by City Clerk Dixon. Next on the agenda is an opportunity for city administration or council to respond to anything said in public comment. I'll start with City Attorney Blue.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, first of all, Mr. Walters is incorrect. I do not recall having any such conversation, and that would be contrary to the charter. And I'm looking at section 3.6 of Troy City Charter, which states that members of the council and the mayor shall receive as compensation for their services the sum of $175 per member per month. So I wanted to clarify that, Mayor, you received the same compensation as every other member of the Troy City Council. So thank you for letting me clarify that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. City Manager Miller, could you, I know we also received an email from Jessica and Alex on Avery Drive about the development project behind their home. And I'm not sure if you have any update or anything you can share as to any response coming up from the city at this point. But obviously they're very concerned and very upset, and I understand why. And I'm just wondering if you have any information from the planning department or anything yet. I know it's just happened today.
No, we don't have any information yet, but as soon as we get it, we'll pass it on to the residents and council.
Okay. So if you're watching, Jessica and Alex, we are looking for information through our planning department with the developer city administration. We'll figure out some information. We all will get back to you. But without having some of that information tonight, we won't be able to have a very meaningful discussion or conversation about it, to say the least, other than to say, understand how frustrated you must be. And your email to us earlier spoke about, being at home during the COVID-19 and having, the opportunity to go outside and then have that kind of being taken away from you. So we'll definitely look into it and get back to you in some respect. Maybe some of you on council have already responded directly, but I intend to as well. So Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, I saw your hand go up. Did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what the city attorney said, in that, I assure residents that, speaking in defense of the mayor, we only get paid $175 a month. The mayor and all council members, we all get paid the exact same. It's in the charter. What was said was not true. I got your back, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Councilmember Chamberlain Trianga.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank David Anderson for his words, and thank you for taking part in that democratic process together. And I just wanted to affirm many of the passions and interests and care that you have for Troy is the care that we all have as well, and myself. And I was very happy to hear you use the word powerhouse. I know back in May when I was speaking about Troy and talking with Mayor Baker and council about a task force and partnering with our Chamber of Commerce, we used exactly those words, helping Troy to be and remain the economic powerhouse it always has been and always will be. So we'd love to invite you to partner more and with all of our amazing committees and other proposed activities that we've done, and would love to partner with you as well. So I hope that we can reach out and we can find ways to meaningfully partner going forward.
Anybody else? Making sure I gotta check for hands. I forget. Sorry about that. The first caller, first email regarding the violinist. We are actually in the process of putting together a proclamation that will be under consideration at our next city council meeting, and then we'll be, assuming that gets approved, we'll be presenting a proclamation at the first meeting in September. We absolutely think she has done an amazing job providing this music throughout our community on the water. I mean, what a beautiful thing to do. And I know it's a lot of people have reached out to us and shared how deserving she is of some sort of award. So Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, I saw your hand go up.
Just a random thought. Could we invite them to join the GoToMeeting to actually be present to receive the proclamation? Would that be too difficult to arrange, or because that would be, I think it'd be
more
wonderful.
meaningful to present them to somebody as opposed to me just reading it. Well, we'll see if we're still meeting virtually in September. That's the first thing we'll have to look at. As of right now, I believe the governor's order doesn't extend to September, so we'll see. But then we can talk with city administration about whether or not we want to do that from a precedent standpoint, if we want to invite people to come in. We've been pretty restricted as to who's come into our go-to meetings, but let's maybe cross that bridge in a couple weeks. I agree with you. To Mr. Walters, I appreciate your call. City Attorney Bloom read from the charter, which is what I was going to ask her to do. I know it's sometimes hard to believe that the mayor makes $175 a month in the city of Troy, but it's true. And I understand your concerns, but $175 a month, $161 after taxes. So that's just the way it is. And but I appreciate, again, I know that you've been involved in the city for a long time. So keep staying involved. That's good. But not making a six-figure salary as mayor of Troy. And to David Anderson, very nice of you to call in and leave a message after an election. That's not always easy to do. And I think it does say something nice about our community. I posted the day after the election last week a picture on my Facebook and my social media that was taken, I think, outside of St. Nick's Church on Waddles, and it was at the polling precinct day, and there was Rebecca holding her sign and David Anderson holding his sign, and they were both at the same precinct location on election day, and they were both smiling. And I don't know the backstory of that picture, but to me, it said a lot about what our city is about. And it was a pretty contentious campaign at times, and they both handled election day, and as evidenced by that picture, with grace. And I thought that was a really nice thing to see in our community, in our city. And I said so and posted that picture. And again, congratulations, Rebecca. You did a great job. You won by a good margin, and that's fantastic. And here we are. And we do look forward to engaging all of our residents and former candidates and everything. I think that's a great opportunity. Mr. Anderson does have a 40-year plus history in our city, and his perspective is one that always needs to be kept in our minds when we're making decisions. So that's it for me tonight on the public. So that concludes City Council, City Administration response to public comment. There are no postponed items this evening. We move on to regular business now. There are board and committee appointments. There are no mayoral appointments, but we do have some city council appointments tonight. So Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Troy City Council hereby appoints to the Liquor Advisory Committee David Haight for the term expiring January 31st, 2022.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that City Council appoints David Haight to the Liquor Advisory Committee for the term expiring January 31st, 2022. Any discussion this evening? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham.
Yes.
Motion carries. We thank Mr. Haight for his appointment. Mayor Pro Tem.
The Troy City Council hereby appoints to the Personnel Board David Haight and Ann Sacrison to the terms expiring April 30th, 2023.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain Krienga, that City Council appoints to the Personnel Board David Haight and Ann Sacrison for the terms expiring April 30th, 2023. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks.
Yes.
Motion carries. Again, Mr. Haight, Ms. Sacrison, thank you very much for volunteering to be on the important Personnel Board. Mayor Pro Tem.
And Troy City Council hereby appoints to the Zoning Board of Appeals Aaron Green to the regular term expiring April 30th, 2022.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Brooks, that the Troy City Council appoints Aaron Green to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the term expiring April 30th, 2022. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Green, for taking this full appointment on the ZBA. We've been our alternate before. We thank you for your continued service to the city. That concludes City Council appointments this evening. We next move on to I2, Board and Committee nominations. I have no mayoral nominations this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, I believe you have a City Council nomination.
Yep, just one today. To the Zoning Board of Appeals, I would like to nominate Mahendra Kenkri for the alternate term, or the alternate seat that expires on January 31st, 2021.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Abraham, that City Council nominates Mahendra Kenkri as the alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the term expiring January 31st, 2021. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks, Councilmember Brooks.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Councilmember Chamberlain Craig,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt.
Yes.
Motion carries. That concludes City Council nominations this evening. There's no request for closed session, so we move on to I4, Library Millage Ballot Language. This will be introduced by Assistant City Manager Bob Bruner. We have Library Director Kathy Russ, and it'll also be addressed by City Attorney Lori Bloom. So I think I turn it over to you, Bob, first. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Prepared a brief presentation to introduce this item, mostly things that the City Council has seen before, but just want to give a quick review for anybody who's tuning in for the first time. So give IT a moment to load that presentation. Okay, here to talk about library funding once again. Next slide, please. Agenda, we're going to stick with the library past, present, and future motif that worked well during the last presentation, I think. And then we'll turn the discussion of ballot language over to City Attorney Bloom. Next slide, please.
Hey, Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
I'm not seeing a presentation. Am I the only one not seeing a presentation?
I see
Everybody
it.
else seeing it?
I see one.
I see it.
I can see it.
Okay. I don't, so that's fine. No worries. Continue then. I've seen everything in the packet, so I'm okay. Oh, you know what? I found it. Sorry about that. Not sure why.
Okay.
It's shrunken down. I gotta fix my screen here. Go ahead. There we go.
No problem. It's a beautiful presentation. It's worth the wait, I assure you, or it's worth the trouble. Okay, so we like I said, we've talked about most of this in the past, so want to give a quick review. The city's was previously funded through the city's operating millage until the Great Recession. 10 years ago, voters first approved a dedicated library millage, actually in 2011, and then again renewed it in 2015. This allowed the city to continue its to operate the library while relieving the strain on the city's operating millage, which is just 6.5 mils. And this experience was not at all unique to the city of Troy. Out of the 45 Class 6 public libraries in Michigan, and those are libraries that serve more than 50,000 people, nearly all of them have a dedicated millage. Even more as recently as within the last several years. Next slide. So currently, the library millage doesn't cover the full cost of operating the library. the amount of money that we're going to spend on operating the library in the current fiscal year relies on more than just the library property tax revenue we're bringing in. There's some library fund balance and other revenue as well. So the current funding level is not sustainable for operations. Next slide, please. We've talked about the building maintenance, maintaining the library. The library is actually two buildings. One built in the 70s, the other built in the 80s. We've spent approximately $2.8 million on building upgrades since the library millage began. That averages $300,000 a year. Some years it's been more, some years it's been less. This year, the capital projects fund is contributed, or I'm sorry, I should say this previous fiscal year, the one that just ended in June, the capital projects fund contributed $1.2 million for renovations and roof replacement. There was some more money in the budget for minor repairs, but there was another $228,000 of maintenance that was deferred due to lack of funds. And we know that in the future, we have major HVAC system replacements and windows and other things that need to be done to keep our building up to date. Next slide, please. So this is the latest iteration of the library hierarchy of needs pyramid with financial security at the bottom. The thinking here being that a library that has a dedicated revenue source that is big enough for its own needs means it doesn't have to compete with other priorities when the going gets tough. We know that building maintenance is incredibly important. Doesn't do much. We can't have a collection, can't have staff without a library building. So that's very important. And then the library materials, the collection. Not much use in having a library if it doesn't have materials people want. And then 7-day service is a priority that we've heard over and over again, both from council members and community members through the survey and the focus groups that we did during the public engagement in the weeks prior to tonight. And then building upgrades being something that's also very important to the community. Next slide, please. So when last we spoke, we talked about 4 different options, and City Council informally has narrowed the discussion down to 1 mil or 1.1 mil. So this table compares the present 0.7 of a mil that's been rolled back and the tax revenue that generates compared to what 1 mil or 1.1 mil would potentially generate. And the idea here is to show the differences between the current library, what 1 mil could do and what 1.1 mil could do. So at the 1 and 1.1 mil level, we should be able to afford 7-day service, increasing library hours from 55 hours a week to 65 hours a week. That's increasing the personnel budget from about $2.4 million a year to $3 million a year. Either option can sustain that. Really, the biggest difference between the two is the building maintenance and upgrades. With currently, $200,000 a year, not enough to keep up with the needs. The 1 mil option has $500,000 a year, and the 1.1 mil option has $1 million a year. And then everything else is the same. Collection budget, $600,000, computer services, $500,000, and then everything else is $500,000. And those are just kind of some of the core non-variable costs of operating the library. Now, obviously, City Council is going to have opportunity to adopt a budget every year and decide how much money to spend within all these categories. But the point of this table is to really kind of illustrate, what the difference is among the options. And then last but not least, assuming based on a $130,000 taxable value, which is about average in the city of Troy in the calendar year 2019, the difference between what the average taxpayer is currently paying, $7.37, versus the 1 mil option is just under $11, and the 1.1 mil option is just under $12. So next slide, please. Again, highlight the major difference between the options here. 1 mil generates $5 million over 10 years, 5.5 million over 10 years. 1.1 mil generates $10 million over 10 years. And so the 1 mil option, like I said, a lot of that money would be used for maintenance rather than upgrades. Like I said, in the last 10 years, we've averaged $300,000 a year in maintenance. So with $500,000 a year, there would be the potential for some upgrades, but we anticipate that would be mostly maintenance and kind of keeping up with the aging facility, versus the 1.1 mil option would obviously allow more money for more upgrades. And I've got some bullet points here just to remind folks of the types of upgrades that we've talked about in the past. Study spaces, youth services area renovation. These are things that have come up both in the survey results and focus groups and other places as being high priorities. Next slide, please. So this is our library expenditures from 2006 to current, which fiscal year ending 2006 was peak library when adjusting for inflation. And then you can see expenditures went down during the recession and have slowly increased. And then the 1 mil revenue, what that would generate would get us back up to 5.1 million. And then the 1.1 mil revenue would get us up to about 5.6 million. So either one of these options would still be behind where we once were in terms of library expenditures historically. Next slide. And this is the city's total millage rate. This has been a frequent topic of conversation when we've discussed the library millage. You can see back in the fiscal year that ended in 2011, that was the last year before the new dedicated library millage came into effect. So you see it go from 9.4 mils in the fiscal year that ended 2011, up a little over 10 mils in the fiscal year that ended in 2012. That was the first year of the new library millage when that kicked in. And then it crept up a little bit, peaked at 10.52 mils in the fiscal year that ended 2014, but then has pretty steadily declined down to the point this year where our total city millage rate is 9.9991. And so the 1 mil option, because there's a debt millage that's going to end next year and the existing library millage that ends next year, if the 1.1 mil option is implemented, then overall the city's millage rate is still going to go down slightly. The 1.1 mil option would increase the city's millage rate slightly, but still well below the peak of 10.52 mils in the fiscal year that ended 2014. Next slide. So lots of things to consider tonight as City Council deliberates on these options, but just two reminders before we get into ballot language is that current millage rate's not sustainable. It's not on the table. So that's on the low side. On the high side, City Council can levy less than the maximum millage rate approved by voters. So what you're actually asking voters for is approval of a maximum rate. City council can decide to levy less than that maximum rate in any given year. And that's a decision that is reviewed every year when you adopt the budget and you adopt the millage rates. So could be a different rate every year for the next 10 years if a 10-year term is adopted. So just those last two reminders before, next slide, please. Turn it over to the city attorney to talk about ballot language.
Thank you, Mayor. So before council, there are two proposals. The first proposal is alternate A, and that is for a 1.1 mil levy. Alternative B is a 1.0 mil levy. And this language, what we did was we attempted to provide some historical context as well so that the voters have as much of the information as possible. We also needed to make sure that it complies with the statutory mandate. So again, the transparency for the voters so that they are provided with as much information as we can. Also recognizing that it is going on a ballot and that there are several other items on the ballot. So we tried to make it as concise as possible. And with that, we are available to answer any questions that council has about these two proposals.
Thank you both. Did Kathy have anything specific as part of her presentation, or she's just here for questions? Okay. And there we go. Very good. Okay, any questions for Assistant City Attorney Bruner or City Attorney Bloom? Did I say Assistant City Attorney Bruner? I might have said that wrong. Huh? I just gave you a different job. Assistant City Manager Bruner and City Attorney Bloom. Any questions at this point? No questions? Oh, Councilmember Chamberlain-Krianga.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick question, and this just might be my becoming familiar with ballot language, is in the ballot language, it talks about the amount raised in 2021. And I wonder, just a lot of residents aren't always aware of the fiscal year, how it works. Is there a way to kind of clarify what that fiscal year 2021 is? It's because that's what it refers to, but people may think in their minds 2021. I don't know how ballot language works, if there is a possibility for more clarity, or if you think that's not needed.
So Mayor, I can just indicate that the statute does require us to put the amount that will be raised in the first year that it's levied. So I wanted to make sure of that. And we use it on fiscal years. So our fiscal year is going to end June 30th of 2021. And then the next one will start July 1 of 2021. And so that's the year that it will start, the levy will be collected, is for that fiscal year starting July 1 of 2021.
Right.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
So the question was just, in the language, could we have from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022? Or is it just, there isn't a lot of space, so we make do with what we've got there? That's clear enough. We describe it to voters when we're communicating out.
Bob, did you have something to add?
Yeah, this is confusing because from a taxpayer perspective, they're paying the tax bill in July of 2021. And that, for most people, that's what matters to them, is that it's 2021. For the city, it's the fiscal year that begins in July 2021 and ends in 2022. So I think by using the 2021 date, which is when the taxpayer is paying the tax, I think it's actually more clear that way, the way it's presented, rather than confusing the issue of when I pay my tax bill versus when the city's fiscal year is.
City Attorney Bloom?
And Mayor, I just wanted to clarify that there will be educational materials as well, and those will not have the same limitations, space limitations. And so this is something that absolutely council may want to address when it provides the educational materials to the public.
I actually, along those lines, I mean, I know we can't change the ballot language because we're probably at about 100 words anyway. I didn't count them, but it's unfortunate that we can't say how much we've already, it almost sounds like we're getting a new $5+ million amount of revenue, but it's not that much of an addition compared to what we're already getting before. So it's too bad that it can't spread. Just a commentary, not really a question on that. But were there other questions? I had a couple quick questions that only came to me during this presentation. I thought I'd asked all the questions I had on this one, but I just want to clarify, and Bob, you had said during the presentation, we should be able to afford a 7-day library. And I think I know why you said that, because we never want to say definitively, we don't know what's going to happen with the economy, but a big part of this millage and the increase that's part of it for me is that we're going to have a 7-day library. And I know that our community will want to know that. So I understand why it's not in specific ballot language, but when you said that, I thought, I just want to make sure that the plan as of this council and as of city administration and what we intend to do with this money is to provide for that 7th day, correct?
Yeah, the money will be there. It's up to the city council to appropriate it every year. So if I tiptoe around those kind of issues, it's because it's your decision to make, city council, not mine. But certainly with this amount of revenue, the funds will be there for a 7-day library.
Great. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. And then one other thing, on page 7 of your presentation, under the everything else category for both the 1.0 and the 1.1, there's $500,000 allocated there. Can you, I know we've talked a lot about this, but just for tonight's purposes, in case tonight someone's tuning in for the first time, can you just kind of give a short analysis of what that everything else entails for transparency purposes?
Yeah, and Kathy may be able to chime in on this better than I can, but a big part of it is the custodial contract. Just to clean the building, I think is over $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Kathy, what else is lumped in there?
Sure, that's your utilities, office supplies, custodial. Kind of the things that people don't think about, but everybody needs. We have office supplies, plus we have operating supplies. So that office supplies are your paper clips, your toner for the copy machine, but then operating supplies for a library. Think of your plastic jackets that go on books. Think of your barcodes. Think of your things that make regular books, library books. All of those materials for us. And again, in addition to office supply, utilities and cleaning and, contracts that we have, our copy machine contracts, maintenance agreements, and so forth.
Okay, and included in all of that, both of these, I'm assuming, are good, allow for additional funds to be put back into the library's fund balance, unassigned fund balance. So I know as of right now, we're very low. It's almost gone, I think, as of this last fiscal year. Both of these projections include funds being put back into the fund balance. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the funds will be there for the city council to appropriate or save into fund balance.
And would that come out of the everything else, Bob, or what is that? Where do those funds typically come from?
Well, it'll be a trade-off between upgrades and fund balance. And also there's the other revenue, which, at this point is in the current fiscal years, somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000. And actually we received our penal fine check just this week, and we know that's going to come in. That revenue will be less than budgeted. So there's kind of two major areas that fund balance replenishment will come in. One is the other revenues, which I've referred to as the icing on the cake in terms of the revenues, and then the other things would whatever doesn't get spent on upgrades. The city council will have to balance kind of how much to spend on upgrades versus how much to put back into fund balance for fiscal sustainability.
City Manager Miller, thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Mayor. And Kathy, Russ, please feel free to chime in. Done. But in the previous 2.7 millages, we had this working habit of building up the fund balance and then bleeding it down. And it sort of was a roller coaster. And I know, Kathy, you kind of lived it. Can you explain how we did it before?
Sure. Thank you, City Manager Miller. So the first year when the millage was passed in August of 2011, the city and the library were already 1 month into that 2011-2012 fiscal year. So the millage was passed, and the library had lost a third of its staff through layoffs, and then we lost an additional probably 10 staff members because people were leaving for other jobs because they thought the library was closing. So when the millage was passed, one of the first things that I had to do working with HR was try to refill all of those open positions so we could get library operations back up to normal. It took us about 6 months to do that. So we essentially spent the first year of the library millage operating on about a half a year's budget, and the remainder, the money that we didn't spend, went into the library's fund balance. And that's what we've been drawing from for the last 9 years. And as you know, anytime we don't spend our full budget, that the remainder goes into the library's fund balance. Now, it certainly has not been as significant as it was that first year, but we didn't do a lot of building maintenance projects the first couple of years that after the millage had passed. We really got going with building projects once we had embarked on our strategic planning process, which was 2013 to 2015. So we did a lot of cosmetic improvements to the building, like the wayfinding and some very minor renovations to the circulation area. So we've been essentially drawing down that fund balance for the last 9 years that we built up in that first year of the millage. So does that answer the question?
It does. I appreciate it. I'm just wondering if at some point we might want to consider dedicating on a regular basis certain money to the fund balance, or having a policy like we do for our general unassigned fund balance of having it certain percentages, just so that, it's the rainy day fund for the library might not be such a bad thing to have a policy effect on that. City Manager Miller?
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily discuss this evening, but the CFO, Rob Melzak, is listening, and if and when this passes, we'll definitely address a more stable, consistent fund balance.
Perfect. Thank you. Library. Kathy?
I do want to mention, while we have done some cosmetic improvements to the building, like the wayfinding, a majority of the capital improvements have been towards preserving and maintaining an almost 50-year-old building that's attached by a hallway to a 36-year-old building. So water in the basement, new electrical panels, various, the skylight replacement, those sorts of things. So drawing down of the fund balance has occurred, I would say, not so much for operational purposes, but for capital purposes, just so you're aware of that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions at this point? We've asked a lot of questions over the past, since our June 8th initial meeting, so I'm not surprised that there's not a lot of questions tonight. Thank you, Bob and Kathy and Lori, for presenting good information, and Mark, obviously, and everybody for presenting good information to us over the past few months, allowing us to get to this point. It's hard to believe we're actually at this point when it seems kind of far in the distance at one point. We're talking about the August 10th meeting. But with that said, would anybody like to move a resolution to get something on the table? Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I will move I-4, library millage ballot language, alternate A, 1.1 mill levy, as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Abraham, that we approve I-4 library millage ballot language, alternate A, 1.1 mill levy, as printed. City Attorney Bloom, did you want us to read this into the record this evening? In my mind, I remembered that, but maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking something else.
No, it's included in the agenda packet, so anybody who wants to review it is available for them.
Very good. Quick discussion. Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton.
Both options, 1 and 1.1, would be a significant improvement for the library. I know Mayor Baker last week, you bulk of your support for 1 mil, which I think would be a great thing for our city. I agree. One topic you brought up was maybe in the future, the voters of Troy will want to approve some kind of bond issue to rebuild the library, to do a significant capital improvement. And I thought that was a very astute point, that could be something we do in the future. My major reason for wanting 1.1 over 1 is for that potential of $500,000 of extra capital improvements we could do every year. But my thoughts of why I support the 1.1 is, first of all, the difference between 1 mil and 1.1 mil will cost the average household in Troy about $1 a month difference. So that's really the difference between the two. But that $1 a month, I think, could deliver so much good for our library, from extra maintenance expenses, extra capital expenses, to expanding our collection, increasing circulation, and, as you discussed, to building that fund balance in years where we're doing well, so that we can carry through the years where things are a little more difficult. There's potential next year that that property values could drop, and so that 0.1, that extra $1 a month, really brings a margin of safety, I think, to our library. The message I'm hearing from voters, what we saw in our polling and our focus groups, was clear that our residents want our library to be the best library in the region. And I think this gives us that opportunity to do that. I mean, if you're looking at how this will impact our overall city tax rate, the tax rate, even after a 1.1 mil, if that was approved, our overall city tax rate would still be less than it's been in 9 out of the last 10 years in the 2021 year levy. So we're still talking a significantly less tax rate than what voters have experienced in the last 10 years. So to me, all those factors come together to make me support 1.1. So I totally understand your reasons for 1, Mayor, and I think both options are good options. And I'm just, in the end, it's up to the voters. We are trying to present the option that the voters would most likely want. And to me, that's what they're telling me that they want.
Very good. Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, since at my last meeting, I also expressed my interest in a 1.1 over a 1 millage rate as well. And I really sat down during this, since our last meeting, and reviewed kind of all of our meetings and all of our discussions about the library, and kind of outlined my reasoning for supporting the 1.1. A lot of them are, overlap with Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton's. And my first point is that I still am concerned about potential Headley rollbacks. While I recognize that we cannot, I can't predict the economic future. When we look at what happened in the 10 years post the 08-09 economic crisis, Headley has been an issue. And so, we can do things to potentially correct it, like vote for Headley override, or, change the rate, sometime before the next 10-year time frame. However, I think we have an obligation to try to get things right at this point. And I do believe that 1.1 is less likely to require any adjustments or corrections over the next 10 years. The other thing is that, many of the residents want to understand what they get from a 1.1 versus a 1.0 millage. And, when you compare, the benefits and what residents get from a 1.1 millage, you see, there's new furniture, which, contributes to the aesthetics of the building, which is a representation of our city. It's a representation of, the care that we put into our community. Also, the youth services, the potential meeting rooms, all of these I see are things that can help better meet the needs of our community. And I think it's important that we have a library that can meet the needs of our community. Also, we talked about, in economic difficult times, that, we don't want to raise taxes per se. But you can also say that during difficult economic times, people really turn to their community resources and rely on their community resources. And people rely on the library for things such as books, the electronic support and resources that it provides. People go to the library for the internet. People go to the library for being able to print documents. So all of those kinds of things can really support people through economic difficult times. And then also, like we said, the difference between a rate of 1.1 versus 1.0 is about $1.09 per month per household. And I really do think that, what we get out of it, the investment, the return on investment is so much greater than, what we're putting into it. Also, when I compare the difference between 1.0 and 1.1, a lot of that money, like we were talking about, goes towards the building maintenance. And that's really important. I mean, we have a building that is older and it's getting older. And I anticipate that over the next 10 years, the needs for the building are going to be greater than they have been even in the past. And so it's important to have the funds available to put into the building as, for those upgrades as needed. And then also, when you just look at our millage rate of 1.1 and you compare it to our neighboring cities, it's really in line with a lot of our cities. And so it's really not out of touch. And I think you also have to put these millages in context and compare it to, what other neighboring communities are doing and putting into their libraries. And when you look at our overall tax rate, yes, a 1.1 millage does cause a slight uptick in our overall tax rate. It would be like 10.04, which is a slight uptick from 9.991 this year, but it is an overall decrease from 2012, basically 2012 all the way up to 2020. So it still is far, less of a tax increase, especially when you compare what we get in the city of Troy to other neighboring communities. So, I looked at the tax rate in Rochester Hills for 2020 is 10.46 versus Southfield 27.82. So overall, our tax rate in Troy is tremendously low when you compare it to other communities and what we get for the rate of return, for our return on investment. So those are kind of the things that I outlined and why I support a rate of 1.1 versus 1.0.
Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Chamberlain-Krienga.
Thank you, Mayor. So I took on the charge to continue having conversations with residents. And as you know, I've been speaking a lot with residents over the past few weeks. And what I found is among kind of two groups in particular, different opinions, but actually they're very similar, kind of coalesced, is I was speaking a lot with parents, a lot with my neighbors, with friends who have school-aged children. And when I brought up this decision, they emphatically would say, 1.1, support the library. I love the library. Do all that you can. And that was regardless of anyone's economic situation during even these difficult times. People were emphatic in doing all that we can to support the library. And then as I spoke with seniors, I was hearing a message unsolicited that seniors do feel that Troy's tax rate is high. They feel that they're struggling. They fear being pushed out. But when we talk more about it, and I said, oh, well, let me talk about the library. We do have a decision to make. Is what they would say is what they find troublesome or what's difficult for them is not with the city's tax rate. It's more with the school portion that comes out of their taxes. And then as I brought up the library, and I said, well, what if, we have this option 1.0, 1.1 mills, and, what do you think? And they would never outright say no, they just wanted to know more. And so as I shared some information of what that would mean in terms of your taxes and the difference of, as Councilmember Brooks said, $1.09 between 1 versus 1.1, is I found that the opinion from our seniors was yes. And they would always follow that by how they're using the library, some of them presenting at the library, taking part in book clubs at the library. So I found between those two groups, even among some seniors who are concerned about the tax rate, is when it came to the library, they did want to do what they could to support the library. And they were really open to these options on the table. And so that then led me, and I'm going to repeat a little bit of what my colleagues said, because I just also wanted for myself just to kind of outline it, kind of why I would like to support a 1.1 option. Because not only is it what we've heard from residents, and it's what I've heard even the past couple of weeks since our last meeting, is I do feel that people are ready to pay more to get more. And that when I looked at the rate of 1.1, that the overall millage rate that it's going to give us of the 10.0386, that looking back, that right, this is still less than the city's overall tax rate for fiscal years 2012 to 2020. So that's 2012 to 2020. Is even if we approve 1.1, it's still much lower than what we've paid for a pretty significant period of time in terms of our that millage rate, tax rate. And as we said, that difference between 1 versus 1.1 is just $1.09 a month. And knowing that for $1.09 a month, you can get twice as much in terms of revenue and intake, that I think that is a big value for what you'd be paying. And that remembering, and as I shared with residents I spoke with, that even as we choose 1.1, it still keeps us, we're just average in Oakland County in terms of what we're spending on our library. This isn't putting us above average. This is just trying to get us even at average. And people were shocked by that. Because of course, as I said, they're ready to spend more. To get more, and they want to spend as much as their other municipalities in the area. And it allows this library, we know this library is high impact, but to be high impact in the sense of hours, days, and funding, and to then shore up that fund balance as we're talking about. And we all know that it is good to have a rainy day fund. It's good to have those savings. And my other big thought is it's always easier to pass 1.1 mil or seek to, as the voters, pass that, we would hope, is put that on the table. And then if due to COVID, we find that the economic situation is such that we see a resurgence and we see the economy and the market really take a nosedive, worse than what we have seen, is we can choose, of course, as we've said as a council, to just levy 1.0. And I would want to be very cognizant of how our residents are doing and to be open to doing that. But to put 1.1 on the table for residents to decide, it's easier to do that than to put 1.0 on the table and then find in 6 years of a 10-year millage duration that we wish we had more and how to get that extra $500,000. So I would rather put the 1.1 on now. So that's kind of a summary of where I'm thinking. And I do think it really comes out of a lot of rich conversations with residents, not only our great survey work and focus groups, but also just talking with neighbors and talking with folks around the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Chamberlain-Criega. Anyone else? Councilmember Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. The conversation that we're having with residents today has evolved over the past 10 years when it comes to the library millage. And what has become very clear, and it was a predominant theme in all the focus groups and in the survey finding, is that residents want sustainable funding and they want stable funding. They're not interested in coming back every 4 to 5 years to vote on this. And I think with that in mind, council has to be very mindful that what we ask for meets the criteria of sustainable and stable. The risks that I'm most concerned about in making sure that we have sufficient funding for the library are threefold. One was mentioned by Councilwoman Brooks, which is Headley, and I know Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton has mentioned this quite extensively, is that the risk to Headley. None of us can predict the future, but we have seen it impact the library millage already. Our 0.7 that we have in place today really isn't 0.7 now, and there is reason to believe that could happen again in the future. Not guaranteed, but it's a real possibility. The second risk that I see is changes in the minimum wage. We saw just a few years ago that the Michigan legislature raised the minimum wage, and that had a profound impact on the library budget. And that wasn't something that we could have predicted in 2011 or in 2015. And yet it's something that we have to react to. And when we have a millage of 10 years, which I do believe is the right length of time for this millage, we need to be very mindful of external decisions and external forces like a minimum wage increase that could also have another profound impact. And for those who aren't already aware, library staff is mainly part-time. It's over 75% part-time staff. So an increase of $1 or $2 in minimum wage really impacts the biggest operating cost, which is the people cost. The third risk that I see is the building itself and having to maintain it. And we've seen over the past few years how much money we've had to put into a very old building just to keep it safe and just to keep it in good condition for residents. And there's easily 1,500 people in that building when it's open on an average day. It has to be a safe building. We can't have leakages. We have to protect the staff that are in there day in and day out. They can't be bailing water from the basement like they seem to be doing all the time. We need to make sure that we fund this well enough where our literal rainy day fund can pay for those rainy days when the roof leaks because it's a 50-year-old building. To date, the library millage hasn't been able to cover that, and we've had to go into our general fund balance to pay for some of those capital expenses, which is not a sustainable practice. And it's something we really don't want to do in the future if we don't have to. And I have no doubt Councilwoman Hoderick will comment on the AAA bond rating, but that's one of the things that bond raters are looking for, that we have stability in our budgeting and that we have sufficient funding for the library so we don't have to pay for it outside of that millage. So when I think about those three big risks, I am now inclined to go for the 1.1 mill rate over the 10 years because it does protect us from an operating perspective for the library, and it protects the general fund because we aren't dipping into it for capital projects. And should the economic downturn deepen, we can rely less on that general fund to sustain the library. We won't have to do that. The other comment that I wanted to make was that, if we do hit economic instability, we do not have to levy the full 1.1. I know several council members have mentioned that. And that, I think, this council and future councils will have the strength to do, even though it may be the easy way to levy the full 1.1 mils. But if times are tough, we can dial it back. That is a decision we can make every year in the budget season. So while at the last meeting I was conflicted between the 1.0 mil and the 1.1 mil, over the past 2 weeks, reflecting more deeply upon the situation and the risks that we may be seeing in the upcoming 10 years, I am much more comfortable with pursuing a 1.1 mill rate.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Councilmember Erickson Gall.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo a lot of the comments that have been made by my fellow members of council, by Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton. At the last meeting, I supported the 1.1 mil, and I continue to support that. I think there's several reasons that indicate that the 1.1 is the better plan and approach. First of all, our residents obviously cherish the library. It's an important institution in our community. They don't want to see it just supported, just propped up. They want to see it, and they want to see us invest in it. That became very clear in the polling information we got. The top things they wanted to see was expanding operations, upgrading the facilities and the amenities in the library. They weren't just simply saying, let's protect the fund balance, which is important, but they weren't concerned about that. What they were concerned with is they want a library that is fully functional and they can be proud of. And I think the 1.1 also gives us flexibility and it gives us options. As has been said multiple times, we don't know what the future is going to hold. What new expenses or costs will come our way. We don't know whether we're going to face an economic downturn. All of these factors can be taken into account when we ultimately decide what up to, as the language says, it's up to 1.1 mils. And we have the flexibility to assess 1 mil, assess 1.1. If we feel the need to take it down to, 0.95, that's not the direction obviously we want to go, but we have that flexibility. And I think having that flexibility and options is very important. And then lastly, I just want to say that one thing that's always been clear to me is that we sometimes underestimate the willingness of our voters to do the right thing, in the sense of invest, not just understanding that what they're going to get for the 1.1, but understanding that it's what's necessary to have the library that we want. And I believe that when voters have the information in front of them, which we're going to do through our voter outreach and educational materials that'll be going out both through mail and social media and otherwise, I think the voters, when they have that information in front of them, I believe that they will agree with us that an up to 1.1 mil is the best option for our city, for protecting our library, for making sure that this absolutely wonderful resource that we all rely on not only stays strong, but is actually improved. And that's why I support the 1.1 mil.
Thank you, Councilmember Erickson Galt. Councilmember Hoderick?
We've had a summer full of tremendous conversation about this topic, thoughtful, studious, and the input that we got from our survey and engagement with residents was very valuable in terms of validating the information I had been hearing for years from residents. And I think back to a neighbor that moved in with 2 small children who was so excited to move into Troy. She picked Troy because it's a great place to live, work, learn, and play. And she did comment to me. She said, I know we have an award-winning library, but I have to say I was underwhelmed when I walked through the doors. I hope someday we can do something about that. And I took the time, and she took the time to understand the millage that was passed, compromise low-level millage of 10 years ago of 0.7 was not an adequate amount then. It wasn't 5 years ago, and it most certainly isn't now. And of course, it's not even on the table. But that millage rate, one of the reasons it was not adequate was because we did have to dip into our own general fund to help keep supporting the library. That puts our AAA bond rating at risk. I do know, talking to residents who learn about that and understand that, they do not want that to happen. So fast forward to now, and all the dialogue we've had, I really appreciate the reflections that were shared by all my fellow council members here tonight. Yes, to everything that you all said, and the up to 1.1 for 10 years is the right answer to put in front of the voters. It's the fiscally responsible, studied, well-researched choice for tonight to put before our voters. And I feel I was still sorting it out last meeting, thinking it through. But like all of you, spent a lot of time thinking, going back, reflecting. This is a community that prides itself on education, on the cultural aspects of living. The library is it's a force. And we need to properly fund it, but it needs to be fiscally responsible also to our residents. The 1.1 is not a level that is, believe me, I come from a very frugal household, and it's the level that is the right, it's the right approach even for my own personal wallet as we go forward. The more we do not properly take care of this library, the more it's going to cost each of us later. And we need to just step up and do the right thing at the right time. And I believe that the resolution on the table is the right answer at the right time. And I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. That's everyone, right? Well, like a former mayor used to say, I can count. So we can see where everyone's support's coming down. I mean, I have to start off first. I mean, and obviously it's not an issue tonight, but it used to be. I'm 100% in favor of a dedicated library millage, and it's nice that we're past that conversation in the community and actually talking about what level of funding dedicated millage is important, and not so much whether or not we should have it. So, I mean, I think that that's a fantastic thing for our city, and it's tough to. I listened to all of you tonight and over the past few weeks, and of course, I talk to residents a lot, and I have for a long time about this issue specifically, and I can't say that I disagree with anything that anybody here has said tonight in many aspects. And it's interesting to watch and to hear. I mean, I've worked with Councilmember Abraham and Hoderick the longest, and Hamilton next, and then the other three of you more recently. So it's interesting to see some different how you approach these things, I guess is my point. That's a totally separate conversation. So, but it's fascinating to see how we all come to this. I have no doubt that our community is going to rally behind our library and support the right funding level for our library. And if you look at the focus groups we've done, you look at what the surveys show, the polling, I think our community wants to properly fund our library. And I see that being a good thing for November. I do, as you know, I talked about a 1.0 rate at the last meeting. And for a number of reasons, maybe it's my approach on some of this. I still look at things a little differently than the rest of you this evening. And it's based on several factors, but I really I'm having a hard time with the idea of using at a 1.1, it's an extra $500,000 a year to use towards renovations and improvements. And that's $5 million extra dollars over 10 years, which is what we're proposing this evening. And I go back to my original point. I don't know that is actually what we know. It's not enough money to make our library what we all want it to be and what many in this community want it to be. And I'm very cautious of talking about this extra 0.1 as a means to gain, substantial improvements to our library, because I think because of everything that everyone has talked about tonight and all of the concerns, whether it's Headley, whether it's minimum wage, I don't think at the end of the day, in a couple of years, there is going to be as much of that money available for renovations of what will be next year a 50-year-old building, or at least half of it. So I guess I'm struggling with the language of how that gets to be used. Part of me says 1.1, if it was strictly for operations and maintenance, makes more sense to me. But then to say 1.1 to include, capital improvements and renovations, I don't think it gives the community what they want. And I want to be very cautious in how we educate the community with facts moving forward over the next couple of months, because I don't want our community to expect certain things only to pass the millage and realize that, that actually isn't what they wanted. So I said it last time, and and I've talked to some people in the community. I still feel like we're better at a 1.0 millage rate for operations and maintenance. And which is what our library millage should be dedicated for, in my opinion. And we need to look at, as we look at all of our buildings in the city and our facilities assessment report, what we need to go ask the community for in order to be able to take care of these aging buildings in our city, the library included. So I recognize that's not what my fellow council members are looking at things tonight. And again, I can completely count, so I'm pretty sure I know where this vote's going to go. But with a 1.0, we still get Fridays, we get the maintenance taken care of, we get improvements made, and I think that we should be looking at something different, separate, whether it's a bond for renovations of the library and other civic center properties or I think there's 53 city-owned buildings throughout the city that all need various levels of support at this point. But again, I recognize where we are, and it'll be up to the people to vote in November. And again, I'm very confident that the community is going to support our library and do what needs to be done to make sure it's done. I just look at things a little differently as far as the procedure and process and how we get there. That said, what all of you said, I'm like, oh, these council members, they know what they're talking about. This makes sense. This is good. I mean, I agree with, like I said, with everything that you all said. I still am structurally tied up on a little bit. Something that Councilmember Abraham said that kind of took me back, and it was a reminder of exactly what I'm talking about, is a reason to support the additional 0.1 or up to 1.1 was for the building itself, and the roof leaks, and it's a 50-year-old building, and I'm thinking exactly right. Here we are, we're levying potentially up to another $5 million over 10 years to put into a building that's already 50 years old with a consistently leaky roof. So I'm thinking we do need to look at our overall structure and plans for that library, and obviously now's not the time to do it, and we're faced with the option, and the decision making that we need to make tonight is for the operational primary aspect of the library. But I hope the community recognizes that with this levy and with this millage, it doesn't mean that the library is, it may be for the next 10 years it'll be fine with these funds, but I'm not sure that the people of this community really just want us to pour more money into this existing structure. So I hope that in the future we can talk about maybe an overall plan for our buildings, including the library, that maybe can dedicate more funding and perhaps ask the community to support additional funding through a bond, whether for, I hate to say a new library because I know what that cost is, but at least a substantial renovation of some sort, recognizing that because of our AAA bond rating that we've worked so hard to achieve and maintain, and the way the economy is now, those bond rates are so low that it could be a very good investment for the city to look at something like that and to protect future generations by having the world-class library that the people Rebecca's talked to in her neighborhood, the families, the people that everybody expects. And I have the same conversations with people as well. So I completely understand the need and the desire for our library to be well-funded and for people to be proud of our library. And again, Kathy Russ, what you've done with that building over the past 10, 11 years and the way you've run it is nothing short of amazing, knowing all of the work that's gone on behind the scenes just to make it all happen. I mean, so people love our library and what you've done with it. And I would just like to make sure it's properly being taken care of from an operational and facility standpoint. And I don't think this millage alone is what we should only be looking at for our facilities, the aspect of it. So with all that said, I think, again, I want to thank city management and Bob especially for taking the lead on these community conversations and the focus groups, working with Cobalt and the surveys, all the work that I know Kathy's been working on since the last millage request in 2015 got approved, preparing for this moment now. I think that city management has done an outstanding job of providing us on council with consistent quality information and data to think about, and engaging the community in an unprecedented time through a global pandemic, and yet still managing to get good information, have good conversations with people at a time when maybe, frankly, not everybody's thinking about something like the library because there's a lot of other pressing issues going on at home. But so thank you for all of that. And we look forward to, in our report section, we've got a reports on library funding community engagement. So I expect to have a little bit more conversation about that when we get there. But with all that said, I will call for the vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton.
Yes.
Motion carries. So we come here, it's taking a long time to get there. So again, thank you everybody on city staff for getting us to this point. And my fellow council members, I think you all have said some amazing things tonight. So I know that that's what will last carrying forward. So next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda this evening? Would anybody like to move the consent agenda? Councilmember Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed.
Support.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Abraham, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve all members on the consent agenda as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick.
Yes.
The motion is approved. All items on the consent agenda have been approved this evening. There are no memorandums and future council agenda items. We have a public comment earlier. There are no council referrals this evening, so we move on to council comments. Does anybody on council have any comments separate and aside from anything in the report section this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure it's going to be mentioned by other council members, but I just wanted to thank Clerk Dixon and her whole team for how they ran the election last week. You did a phenomenal job. We had, what was it, something like 18,000 absentee ballots returned, 23 absentee ballots sent out, which is unprecedented. It has never happened before in the history of our city in any election, let alone a primary in August. So the way you handled it kept the focus on keeping residents and your staff safe throughout the virus, to make sure they were protected, to not rush things just to rush things, but to make sure that you did it in the most safe and accurate way. Your attention to detail really, I think residents noticed and voters noticed, and they all were very happy with the results. So I just wanted to thank you and commend your whole staff for the job you did.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Well put, Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton. City Clerk Dixon has been, we were talking just before this meeting, I think it was before the meeting, so yeah, and she was talking about, I think she got home around 3 o'clock in the morning on election night, and she was back in the office by 7:30 that next morning, because that's what city clerks do the day after election. So all of our appreciation goes to you. And Bethany and I were out on election day being very safe with masks, and we were giving out some donuts to people who were working, some inside the polls, some outside campaigning for people. And we talked to a lot of people, and everybody that I talked to inside told me they felt very comfortable with the procedures you put in place, and they felt good about it. They obviously, it was pretty quiet turnout in person on election day. All the work was being done under lock and key in the community center where you were, with all those ballots and hardworking volunteers and employees. But I think that we as a city definitely showed our strength as a community in handling this in a secure and safe way, both on the level of protecting from COVID-19, but also as far as protecting our ballots and making sure that everyone felt safe and secure with the voting process as a whole. So if only Oakland County would have accepted our results when you submitted them at 1:30 in the morning, as opposed to waiting until the next morning. That's a whole other issue. We can talk about that later. But maybe you want to talk about it now. But City Clerk Dixon, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment. So first of all, I sent an email to City Manager Miller today and included on it a very extensive list of all the city employees from many, many different departments that helped put the election together for months leading up to it and on election day. And it's a surprising, almost breathtaking list of employees from virtually every department in the city that lend either people, time, resources in order to make the election happen. And as far as the PPE goes, we couldn't have done that without the DPW that took care of procuring a lot of it, delivering it to our office. And of course, my staff that worked tirelessly for, I mean, I'm the one that's on the meeting here, but I have an entire staff that works tirelessly, just as tirelessly as I did, to make that election happen, including the temporary staff that came in and the about 300 election workers that braved the pandemic to come and work in the precincts and in the polling locations. And we're very proud of how we performed. We're very proud of how the election workers performed and how the voters in general that showed up and that voted. We did not have any incidents to report, anything significant to report. Troy police were out patrolling as well, and we did not have any incidents. That was a concern that, because of the news and everything, you hear that stuff happens at polling locations. We didn't have any incidents like that. And the feedback that we received from workers and voters in general were that they all felt safe, which was our number one priority was safety and security, both number one priorities. And we feel like we accomplished that greatly. So, and thank you, of course, to City Manager Miller and to Assistant City Manager Bruner, who also worked, he was a chairperson in the AV Counting Board. So along with other city employees as well, but they supported everything that I wanted to do, every idea I had to make things safe and secure. They were right along with me. So, and I appreciate council's support as well, and all the purchasing of all the stuff that I've had to get, as far as even including the extra machine and everything. So thanks up to everyone who contributed to that.
And I wanted to add also, I know we've talked about this before and we're still dealing with the election we just had. We haven't even certified all of those results yet at Oakland County, but as we move forward, I know that several clerks in the state, as well as current State Senator Ruth Johnson, former Secretary of State, they're big advocates for changing some of the laws at the state level to allow for an early beginning of processing the ballots, the absentee ballots. I know that that's somewhat controversial in some respects for some people, and yet completely not for others. If there's anything you need from us to show support for that, I know we talked about that in the past, please let us know. And because I think, again, along the lines of safety and security of our ballots, and also allowing for a successful processing without having people locked at the community center for 36 hours or so to do something like that might be something that we need to address as best we can, at least by showing our support for you and your recommendations. So if that comes up, please let us know as we move forward.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as that is concerned, there are a number of bills out there that will cover a few different topics, such as being allowed to have shifts for the absentee counting board and being allowed to process ballots before Election Day. Basically, what it comes down to is it's going to take multiple days to process all the absentee ballots. Right now in my office, we have about 30,000 applications that are going to be sent out for November, because we got a number of applications that only wanted November, even when we were accepting the August applications. So we have 30,000 ballots to go out, and it's only going to get more. Nobody's going to withdraw their application. So it's going to take more than one day. And we hope that somebody in the legislature, some people in the legislature or at the state level will make some decisions that will give us more time. Otherwise, we will have people that will be in the community center. Because I was just talking about this to another clerk friend of mine from a large city. And basically, we can allow people to leave after 8 p.m. on Election Day, but how do we get people to work overnight? We'd have to have a night shift. And that means that I personally, for me, I would have to stay for the entire time. I can't leave. So I would have to, basically be awake for 48 to, 72 hours or something to feel in good conscience that this was being done properly. So something has to give on that level. And if there is if there's a way that, council can, show support or something, I will definitely let Mr. Miller know that we need to have something for council to review. And, as soon as possible. If I hear that something's at the legislative level that could get pushed forward with the right support, I will definitely let Mr. Miller and council know.
And I'm seeing several nodding heads that would show support for doing something like that. So it looks like everyone looks like bobbleheads. Perfect. So that's the support you need. Appreciate that. Any other council comments this evening other than what's on the reports? Councilmember Brooks.
Kind of the thanks and congratulations. Congratulations to Councilmember Rebecca Chamberlain-Kranga on her win. I know it was definitely probably not an easy time to run during the time of COVID, but congratulations, and obviously we look forward to working with you. And also, obviously, a big thank you to Aileen. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, my screen is frozen. And also a big thank you to Aileen and all of the staff and all of the many people that just contribute so much time and so much effort and so much planning for the months to make this August election such a success. I know that we had record numbers of absentee ballots, and I think it was just amazing. I also was standing outside of one of the precincts and spoke to voters as they came out, and everyone also said that they felt very safe voting. And I think that was just very important, during this time, that residents felt very safe to be able to vote in this climate. So I thought it was an excellent job.
Thank you. Additional council comments? Councilmember Erickson Gall.
I echo the comments of how wonderful our clerk, Ms. Dixon, and her staff are, and all of the many members of the City of Troy staff who are not part of the clerk's department on a normal basis, but stepped up to make sure that this got done. The other people I want to thank is I want to thank the voters, not just for showing up, which is amazing, that having that kind of turnout in an August primary, but doing so safely. I was outside of a polling location for a few hours Tuesday night. I would have been probably helping count AV ballots or something of that nature, except I had to spend my entire day at the Court of Appeals. But in any case, I wanted to thank the voters for voting safely. I don't think I saw a single person walk into the voting location without a mask on. I really appreciate the fact that they were taking it seriously, not just for their benefit, but for the benefit of all the people who stepped up to work those polling locations. All of our poll workers had PPE, they had face masks, some of them had shields. There were plenty of other materials there to keep the place safe, but it's only as safe as the people who are walking in the door. And I honestly can't remember seeing a single person walking in without a mask on, including one wonderful woman who walked in and then ran back out to her car to get her mask. There was a couple who, one of them, they only had one mask, so one of them wore one and they came back and forth. So people were going out of their way to be safe. And this is the sort of community respect and appreciation that we need to see in this time. We need to see people thinking about other people, caring about other people, making sure they're doing their part to help minimize or prevent the spread of this deadly virus. And I just, so much appreciation to my fellow residents of Troy for taking the time to make sure that they were properly masked before they showed up to exercise their right to vote. So thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Anyone else this evening? Councilmember Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to piggyback off of the wildly successful primary and how it was run by the clerk's office, I want residents to have an appreciation for the 300 people that, yes, they were compensated, but volunteered a very full day, in some cases a 16-hour day, to make sure voters' voices were heard. This August primary was unprecedented unprecedented in terms of turnout. When you look at the August of 2016 turnout, the rate was about 17%. This August, it was 38%. So we had over double the number of voters. And the number of AV voters, absentee ballot voters, was over 3 times what it was 4 years ago. So in addition to just the normal pandemic challenges faced, the turnout was huge. And I think this was a great demonstration, a fantastic dress rehearsal for what we're going to expect in November. And so, as usual, I'm going to put out the call for people who can volunteer their time and get compensated for it on election day. If it took 300 people to run a primary in August, there's going to be a need for more. And again, I'll echo what Ms. Dixon had said, which is, of course, security of the ballot, security of the voters is most important. If it takes longer, that's secondary. But we want to make sure things are running smoothly so that folks and residents are confident of the whole election process. So if you are able to volunteer your time on election day and get compensated accordingly, that would be fantastic. I'm sure there are going to be more training sessions in the future. And I hope you will also take away that our city takes your health, your security very seriously, and that election workers and voters will be protected. And we demonstrated that in August.
Thank you. Good points. Councilmember Hoderick, did you have something to say?
Just ditto to what everybody said, and huge kudos to everyone involved. Really do appreciate it. And just want to emphasize that in addition to safety, when you're kind of behind the scenes, hearing the city clerk advise us, give us information as we try to make sure we're providing the proper oversight and all the tools and equipment they need, she always emphasizes her passion for the accuracy and safety of the ballots, and can explain, and she did the last meeting, the thoroughness of protecting them and from how there isn't risk of fraud because of all the double checks in the process. And as we head into November and the sense of safety that everybody is still striving for while wanting to exercise the right to vote, voters need to keep this in mind, that accuracy is there. When they receive their absentee ballots, they're going to want to make sure they do their part to get them turned in time. There may be postal delays, so we do have the drop boxes. All the systems and processes are in place. And this primary was a great dry run, and hopefully city staff is hearing, this council's here for you to try to have your backs with whatever it is you need to manage through this next election, the November voting, because we really do appreciate all the forethought, and we're here for you as you continue to think of ideas for how to do this with excellence yet again. We don't take it for granted, City Clerk Dixon. We don't take the team for granted. And we just really applaud you, and we continue to cheer you on. Thank you.
Very good. Any other council comments this evening before we get to the reports? All right, moving on. Next up on the agenda is there are reports. Any discussion or comments on the reports this evening? Councilmember Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to call attention to report P2B, Library Millage Community Engagement. So, certainly council has been talking about the library millage since June, well before June, but really began in earnest in June. We've had focus groups, we've had the surveys, and we've discussed that. But I want our residents to know that just because we've talked about it here at the council table up until this point, the conversation's not over. and that city staff has outlined a pretty detailed outline of how we're going to keep information in front of the community, whether it's a content neutral flyer or postcard that's coming out, or how it's going to engage on social media, Nextdoor, etc. But the conversation will continue. And, you know, in light of the turnout that we anticipate in the November election, that communication is going to be critical, because historically Troy's had an 80% voter turnout, or maybe just under, for presidential election years. I imagine this year could be even higher. So we really want our residents to be informed about what this library millage means, what it means, what it does not mean, and rest assured that we on council and city staff are here to answer questions and make sure everyone makes an informed decision.
Good points. Along those lines, I think I'm sitting here tonight thinking, as you're talking, of course, listening to everything you said, but I'm also thinking, I realize the vast majority of people in our community right now probably don't even know anything about the library millage that's going to be on the ballot. We take for granted how much information we have in the circles of people that we talk to frequently. It's not on a lot of people's minds. And so the education aspect is going to be very, very important, because people need to know the facts. And I know we can put out fact neutral and fact-based mailings. And I believe that our next meeting we'll have a conversation about that potential flyer to go out based on the idea. And I just think that I believe ballots go out the last week of September, or as early as September 24th, which is a month after our next meeting. So it's coming very fast. And I think it's so important that we get that information out there, recognizing what a role social media has in our community, especially today, but also that not everybody is on social media. And I want to make sure, and quite frankly, a lot of people that vote aren't on social media as much. So I want to make sure that information is out there for them. We do have a void right now in our community. The Troy Somerset Gazette's not printing, so it's not in everybody's favorite restaurants or workplaces the Monday of each week. The Troy Times is limited. They're only every other week right now. So there's only a few more newspapers probably before the election, in a sense, at least as things stand right now. So a lot of people perhaps would be more engaged already in understanding if they'd read an article in the Gazette, let's say a week or two ago, and so I want to be so cognizant of that. And I know that Assistant City Manager Bruner did such a great job with the focus group aspect before, and has put together a lot of good information for this engagement plan. It's very, very important to me that we get the facts out there, let people have the information they need to make their decisions. And again, to my point earlier, I know people of our community want to support our library, so I feel very confident about that now, but there's always risk if there's any void in the facts that need to be out there, and people can create things in their minds. So I want to make sure the information is out there, is my point. Looking forward to having a conversation about that at our next meeting, 24th, as an agenda item as well. I guess that's it. Any other comments on those reports? Not seeing any hands go up. There's no closed session this evening. So with that, again, I'll thank our healthcare heroes and first responders, frontline responders who have worked so hard to keep our community safe and to be there for us when many of us were not leaving the house. They were going out for 12-hour shifts every day to be surrounded by people who were sick. So we thank them, and we recognize what a value they are in our community. And also as a reminder to the community, I meant to bring this up in council comments, but the school board has been talking a lot about their plan for moving forward, recognizing the Troy City Council has no authority over the school board or what the process is for whether or not the schools reopen and what capacity. But they do have a special meeting on Wednesday, the 12th, where it's likely there'll be some good conversation about that, in addition to what conversations they've done on some of their Facebook events. So tune into the school board on Wednesday for an update on that as well. So, and with that, we are adjourned.